An online experience is a little different than walking into a church, but one idea stays the same, and that is the guest's first impression. This means that we have to approach our live streaming with that perspective, one of an individual watching on a screen from their home or in their car, rather than sitting in our sanctuary. They can only see, hear, and experience whatever we decide to show them. As an ATEM volunteer, you are in many ways the director of that person's church experience for the day, and how you decide to use the cameras will impact each guest's impression of Lifepoint. Now, I'm not trying to say this to scare you. Pressure can be scary, but can also feel really rewarding. I want you to know that every decision you make is important. From directing camera angles to zooming in to putting media live, every piece of production is working together, and it all makes an eternal impact on the people who join us every week. Here are a few tips for running ATEM during service. Up first is starting a service. While the livestream volunteer handles the few minutes of pre-roll, get ready to start the service. We typically open up with a worship song, and the very first camera you use introduces the environment to an online viewer. For that reason, it's pretty good to start with a wide angle that captures the sanctuary or the stage. During these first few moments, the worship leader will typically address the congregation, welcome people to service, or the singers might immediately begin that first song. Be ready to switch to the leader if they're speaking after a few seconds of that wide shot. It's important to prioritize anyone who is speaking. Make sure that you get them on camera quickly. Even if the worship team is singing, when someone's speaking into the microphone and addressing the room or ad-libbing during worship, make sure that they are on camera so our online audience can see and receive that too. This rule of thumb goes for the rest of worship service. During worship, it's important to keep a fast pace of transitions. Use every camera angle available to immerse the online audience in the worship experience. Switch between camera 1, 2, and 3 every 5 to 7 seconds. Ensure that these volunteers always keep their cameras moving. Move quickly on the band cameras, like guitar, drums, or keys. Only present these band cameras for 2 or 3 seconds max before switching. During preaching, slow down the pace of your transitions. It's okay to leave the same camera live for anywhere from 20 seconds to a whole minute. The only thing I would note is to pay attention to the dynamics of the preacher. If he or she is speaking very intensely with lots of expression on their face, it's a good practice to use camera 1 for a close-up shot. Capturing that intensity in their face and in their eyes can really immerse a guest who's watching online. Next, we'll talk about transitions. There are 2 types of transitions we use. The first is the hard cut, which instantly switches from one camera to another. You can do this one by pressing the space bar or clicking cut in the software control. The second transition is a fade, which mixes 2 cameras together as it transitions. You can do this one by pressing enter on the keyboard or by clicking auto in the software control. Just note that auto will use the number value to determine how fast or slow that transition goes. You can change this by typing in a number there. Changing that number beside the auto button will allow you to have long, slow transitions when it's a mellow worship song, and faster, short fades when the dynamics of the song increase. Adjusting that fade speed during worship can create a very engaging stream that follows the pacing of the service. It's also possible to use the hard cut during worship, but just know that this transition can create a quick, attention-grabbing feeling. So if you're going to use a hard cut during worship, it's better to use it during fast, upbeat songs. And even then, it should be used in conjunction with a fade transition. During preaching, it's best practice to use a hard cut when switching between cameras. If you're using a fade, it can create an awkward experience to see the same subject slowly go from a wide shot where they look really small to a close-up where they fill the whole frame. So during preaching, use hard cuts and then use a fade transition when displaying media such as scriptures, images, or videos used during service. There are a few instances where the vocalists are not singing at all, and there's a music interlude. These are the perfect chances to use the band cameras. If there is a distinct guitar line, switch to the guitar. Or if it's a slow song and the piano is most prominent, use the keys camera for a few extra seconds, especially if it's the start of the song and they're just playing the introduction by themselves. These band cameras make a huge difference in immersing the online audience with the worship experience. They also help to really keep attention, which is pretty important for our guests who have a lot of other distractions if they're watching at home. We can help them stay engaged in God's presence by using our video ministry to help keep their attention. Just avoid using the band cameras during preaching. Even if the musicians begin to play as he comes to a close, it's important to keep the attention on the speaker. You may need to remind camera volunteers to continue moving their camera during worship service. Encourage them to pan left and right continuously across the band. Pay attention to the flow of service. Try and anticipate who will be leading the next verse or who the worship leader is for the whole service. You will need to direct the camera volunteers to move to specific vocalists, especially if they're singing a solo. It's best if you can have them moving their cameras a second or two before that vocalist begins to sing or the leader starts speaking, for example. This anticipation takes practice and will be something you get better at over time, but pay attention during service for these little things. You will also need to direct camera volunteers on their framing. Remember, camera 1 is our close-up shot. It should be zoomed in quite tight on each subject, keeping their head near the top of the frame and their mid-torso at the bottom of the frame. Camera 2 is our medium shot. Make sure that this shot isn't zoomed out too much. It should be framed so that the subject's head is at the very top of the frame and their feet are at the very bottom. Camera 3 is our panning shot. It's positioned to get a unique angle on both the stage and the crowd as needed. During worship service, it should always be moving left and right along the stage and then zooming out to the crowd. During preaching, use camera 3 as an extra close-up angle on the speaker and a wide shot for when the crowd is responding. Be ready to direct that camera volunteer quickly and try to anticipate when the congregation will start clapping and responding. I encourage you to watch the training video for radios if you haven't already. There are a few key pointers there that'll make all the difference when using these radios during service. Always be kind and encouraging when directing your camera volunteers. Let them know when the broadcast has ended and thank them for their excellent help. If you want to learn more, be sure to check out our other training videos, and I want to thank you so much for serving.